Hi, welcome to this week's Cuss N Discuss. I'm your host, Steve Kutie. As always, Flynn Stewart, agent to the stars. Today's special guest, Nick Pernokas. Hard to say, easy to ride.
That's a good one. Yeah, that'll work.
I would have made up that slogan myself, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so this week we talked about it. We've got some viewer questions. We've had questions that were in the descriptions below asking us kind of new topics. We've already discussed finances in the horse biz. We've talked about work ethic. So today we've got kind of a mismatch. So we're going to go to the hat. So whenever we have a new topic that we need to cover, we're going to reach in the hat, see what we get, and then we're going to just kind of cuss and discuss and see what comes out of it. So everybody cool with that idea?
You bet.
Y'all feel safe?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because we have special guest today, Nick. I'm going to let him reach into my hat. Shake it up.
Okay.
Make sure you shake it up.
Okay, I think we've got a fair distribution there.
Okay.
Let's see what we've got. Do you want to read it?
I'll read it.
Okay.
It's it. Well, isn't that convenient? What's your wife's name?
Lindy.
Lindy, of course. It says, I'm interested in buying my first saddle. Can you give me some tips and pointers? Lindy from Stephenville.
Oh, yeah.
How did you get that done?
Well, let's want to see if there's another question.
Let's do this one first, right?
Okay.
So, as one of Nick's many things that he does, professional saddle maker, correct?
Yep.
Roper,
Yep.
actor,
Yep.
author,
Yep.
part-time magician or musician?
No, neither of those.
Neither of those.
Music,
Okay.
music appreciation.
Okay.
I guess.
Perfect. So that's why it's ironic that we do get one from
Did
Lindy.
you say Lindy?
Yeah. About buying a first saddle. So
Okay, and that's a question. What
she's just asking about tips on buying the first saddle, things that they should look for. Kind of what's your go-to subjects?
Well, I think the first thing they ought to do is figure out what they want to do with the saddle, because there are a lot of different types of horses and a lot of different events that you're going to do. And then you also need to figure out what your price range is that you can afford to spend. And my first saddle was a $25 saddle that I bought from a lady that worked for my dad. And I dyed it brown with shoe polish so it would look like John Wayne's saddle, because I wanted a saddle that looked like his. And
Right.
And it's probably about the quality, a little better quality than some of those imported ones you see in the feed stores. That
Right.
you know, so and it served its purpose for a year or two till I traded up for an Ozark Roper.
Nice.
But they're saddles at any price range for an entry-level person, depending on their pocketbook. And I would say that you should go with the best used saddle that you can find reasonably, rather than buying the cheapest new saddle that you can get, because it's a buyer's market right now as far as good quality used saddles. And there's several stores that have all kinds of good programs for buying a used saddle. And you can buy a good quality that way, and you can see if it's held up. And sometimes you can try it on your horse too, rather than going and buying the shiniest new saddle you can get, and you're going to pay more and get less saddle for it.
Right. Now, how important to you, being a saddle maker and knowing how the pieces all go together, is saddle fit, right? I mean, is it more important that it's rider fit, or is it more important that it's horse fit? And, can you make up the lack of for the horse fit with, pads or different ways to fix that?
Well, it depends, because if you're talking about an entry-level person, you want it to fit their saddle, their horse, so they don't have a problem. But it's probably not going to be as crucial as being safe and secure for the rider. But saddle pads and things like that make up for a saddle's a rigid piece of tack, and a saddle tree, which the saddle's built on, is generally a wood, built on some sort of wood framework. So it's a compromise between the horse and the person. There's no way you're strapping a rigid piece of furniture on a horse's back, and the horse's back is moving all the time. So you've got to get a saddle that gets in the ballpark on your horse. And the more specialized you are, the more that you have to get it fitting the horse for that event. But the saddle pads will make up some of it. But the horse doesn't know what you're doing. You have to take care of him first. If you can't get it to fit you exactly, you know that, and you can compensate for it. But you've got to take care of the horse so it doesn't put him in a bind and create a discomfort problem.
Right. What about you, Flynn? Tips, what are you looking for when you're buying a saddle?
Well, I always like to buy used saddles just because they're broken in and you don't have to go spend a lot of time breaking one in. And there's lots of stores that have lots of good used saddles now, and I mean, like Teskey's and NRS and all of those stores, they have several hundred probably used saddles, and some of them are good and some of them aren't so good, but you kind of have to know what you're looking for.
Right. And there's a lot of saddles, right, that are event specific, right? Like you said, I mean, understand what you want to do, right? Because if you're just going to buy a synthetic nylon saddle, it's probably not going to hold up to the rigors of being a rope saddle, right? And if you're going to rope stuff, you have to kind of buy a rope specific saddle. So yeah, first thing, find out what sport discipline, right, that you want to play in, and then buy the saddle that you can afford from that position.
Yeah,
right?
Get some help, get some advice from other horsemen. Don't just go into the store and get it from the salesman. And there's nothing wrong with a synthetic saddle if you're going to go trail riding. That might be what you need. Might be just a ticket. So
right. I think you know, one of the big things that I get asked a lot with the training is seat size. You know, and I know we had a discussion earlier about it on what people ride. You know what I mean? So I mean, I don't have that much junk in the trunk, as the cool kids say, right? And I'm petite, like a steak. But what we do is I ride a 16 and a half or 17 because I want to have plenty of room.
You want a manly saddle.
I want a manly saddle, yes. But I'm gearing towards the future.
Yeah.
Right? Because right now, one day I look like me, one day I look like Flynn.
Yeah.
Right? And if I'm riding a 14, I don't get that many miles out of it, right?
That's
17, I can grow into it.
Yeah, you can.
Yep.
Definitely. It's a big saddle.
So I buy a bigger saddle, and my theory behind it is, one, I want to be able to have a little bit of room to move, right? There, you know, people talk about the pocket, being able to sit in there and not move. But to me, it's the opposite, right? Because I've been bucked off of horses a lot less when I can move in the saddle than one that just has a tight pocket on it. Because if you get out of that pocket, it's pretty hard to crawl back in it because it's a little hole.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what's your thoughts on it?
Well, I think you're right. The seat size becomes sort of an event-specific question too, because it depends on where you want your legs when you ride and how much security you need in the top and the bottom. A cutting saddle, you'd ride with a longer seat. Just say the average person rode, if you just ride a 15.5-inch seat and that feels comfortable to you, you might ride a 16 or 16.5 to ride a cutting horse because you want a little more room so your body can move independently of the horse's body. For reining, you want a little more security on the top, so you might ride a 15.5-inch seat. You want the security for your body to keep it moving too much when your horse is doing maneuvers, but you want your legs to have some freedom. And you want to be able, when you relax your legs and take them off the horse, you want them at least from an equitation position to a little further forward. And with roping, you want to be able to get to the front of the saddle and stay up to rope. So you need a smaller seat, maybe a 14.5 or that size, so that you're right over your stirrups. And then when you lean forward to rope, you can stay up there. If the horse changes leads and pushes you back, you can get right back up there again.
Right.
So.
No, I mean, that makes sense. What do you go for when you're looking?
Also, one thing you didn't say, Nick, is there are different horns on different types of saddles.
Definitely.
The cutting horse saddles, they have a straight up front and a horn that's 3 or 4 inches long, and it's just kind of where you hold it with your hand. And for roping saddles, they have tall horns, but they also have to have room to put some rubber bands around it or something to hold your dally when you dally up. And I always had a cutting saddle and a roping saddle, and I never mixed the two of them, really. And but now I don't ride anymore, so, but there is a difference in the saddles.
Definitely.
So It's talking about the horn, like Flynn said, right? So if you're going to go roping, what are you going to look for? What is going to be the differences structurally with like a cutting horn or reining horn, let's say, as opposed to a regular roping horn, on how they're built differently?
Well, with roping, if you're roping calves or something like that, you generally have a shorter horn that's easy to get a hold of when you get off. For team roping, the horns for a time they went really tall, like 4.5 inches, because the theory was you could dally easier if the horn was up in front of you. As team ropers are riding more custom saddles like the calf ropers do, they try and put the jerk closer to the horse's back. So if you can ride with a shorter horn and you get the dally at the base of the horn, you're going to be closer to his withers. So there's less torque on the horse's back. So about a 3.5 inch to a 4 inch horn now would be what you see in team roping saddles. And reining saddles, of course, usually are smaller horns that are out of the way of your hands. And Flynn pretty well covered the cutting horns.
Yeah. Now, is it how they're attached to the tree? I mean, like, I know you're going to have a rawhide covered tree or fiberglass covered tree. I mean, is that encompassing how the horn is? Is the horn screwed in, bolted in? How do they attach those two so you don't pop a horn?
Well, most horns have 2 screws and 2 bolts in them, and the bolts go all the way through the swell. They're recessed in the bottom, regardless of whether they're covered with rawhide, the trees are covered with rawhide or fiberglass. Most of the horns are the same, and usually they come from the same casting companies. Different companies can't afford to cast their own horns, so they buy them from 1 or 2 foundries. And the exception would be the wood post horn that you see on some of the buckaroo saddles, the big 3-inch wide horn. That's generally wood horn that's recessed into the swell. The way it's attached doesn't really matter as much, because when a tree breaks, or if it does break, it's usually some other part of the tree. The horns, unless it's a really poor horn, the horn isn't going to break. But I will tell you, there was a company back in the 60s, and I won't mention the names, and they had a really good endorsement program. And a fellow brought this saddle, and it was a genuine roping saddle, and the horn just pulled out of the top, and I looked at it. It was an aluminum horn with a couple holes in the side, and they put nails in it, and they put about 2 or 3 long ring nails in there to hold this horn on the swell on the wood. And when it went, it just went and pulled out. So that's the only one I've ever seen like that, but it was probably a labor-saving device.
Yeah.
Well, now also a factor in the height of the swell of the saddle.
Exactly.
On a roping saddle, they're pretty low in the front end, and the horn is. But these cutting horse saddles, they'll be that high, and then have a horn on top of that, because you don't have to tie anything to that horn or do it except to keep your balance.
Now, one question I get asked a lot as well is, when you ride, do you push yourself to the back of the saddle? Now, I say no, because I ride a big enough saddle, and I think that I have a good enough seat that I don't have to do that, right? But, a lot of people talk about, if they're getting fit for a saddle, right, is, push your feet forward, push your butt to the back. What, as a saddle maker / fitter, how
I don't believe in pushing yourself to the back, and we were talking about the way horses stop earlier, and I think they stop better if you relax and collapse into the saddle rather than bracing and pushing back. But I think a person that's going to try a saddle should sit in and have a good equitation posture, which means your back straight and your feet are where they're going to be when you ride. The more of an equitation position you have, your foot's going to be back and you're going to see your toes, and you can probably talk more about that than I can. And then for roping, when you rope, you want to get your feet behind you to stand up. But when you're just seeing if the saddle fits, you want to get in a normal equitation position that you're going to assume when you ride the saddle, and not do anything. You don't want to push against the back or anything like that. You just want to relax and see if it feels comfortable to you. Kind of wiggle around and just see if your seat bones feel good on it, and if the stirrups and the fenders feel good to your legs.
Right. I mean, because ultimately comfort is going to be the biggest thing, right? Because if you get on and you're riding in the Texas summer and you got a bad case of swamp ass and your saddle's rubbing you raw, you don't want to ride.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So then it's miserable and you can't drag yourself to ride. Where at least if you have a comfy saddle, it makes at least the ride enjoyable.
Yeah.
And I think what happens is a lot of people get looked down upon if they want a cheaper saddle, right? Or they have a synthetic saddle. And one of the benefits I think with the synthetic saddle is, one, the weight, and two, the durability, right? Because if they're dirty, you can hose them off, and I mean it's pretty easy care of those, right? But the comfort being the main thing.
Yeah.
And if you've ridden horses long enough, as we all have, I mean, I think you get butt calluses, and you can kind of ride anything. But if you're riding just on the weekend on a trail ride, I mean, they make the seat savers, the lamb's wool, and cushy gel pads, and there's lots of things that you can use to make those saddles comfortable to you, right? And then that fit can be adjusted with the horse. But I think the biggest thing that I've seen with fitting the horse would be that it's too wide in the gullet, right? And the saddle sits down, and then that tips you forward, and then you have a problem with the front of the saddle sitting down on the withers, right? And then I think that's where some horse issues have come from, and that's just from my experience from doing clinics, right? Is those saddles are too wide, they're riding a thin horse, it's sitting down on their withers, and then the horse is always acting up. And it's not that the horse is bad or you're a bad rider, but it's just an ill-fitting saddle.
Well, one thing though, a lot of people blame some of the tipping up in the back where it comes up off the pads on the front being too wide and going down. But generally, the front could be too wide, but a lot of times those bars are too narrow. The space between them is too narrow. And you used to see this a lot more than you do now. But they put the bars together so they felt more comfortable for the rider, but they didn't sit down on the horse. And you'd see people lunging horses at a horse show in the morning, and their saddle would be that far off the pads. And then they get on there and they'd be working on getting the horse to pick his back up and hollow it. Well, their saddle's pushing down on them. It's that narrow place, and it's also what they call the rock in the bars, which is the curve. Some saddles have more rock than others, and that can be a reason why it cants up in the back too.
I thought that was called the cowboy thermometer,
Yeah.
right? When your horse's back is down here and the saddle sticking up like that when you first get on him.
Well, when you get one of those low riders, I've got a dual pep like that, and you put the saddle on him, and it goes, the back of the saddle picks up like that, and then you just have to let him stand on the cross ties for about 20 minutes, and then it comes back in.
Right. Yeah. That's just a added safety feature.
Yeah.
Right.
Barometer.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, do you guys have any other suggestions on, buying that first saddle?
Oh, I don't guess I do. Really, we've pretty well covered it all.
I would say that everybody asks about trees and if the trees sound or not, and you should go to a professional or get on YouTube. I won't go into it here, but it's very simple to find out if your tree is broken, and you should ask somebody how to do that and check it. It's very rare. It's not as common as you might think, but you should know how to check that. Check all the leather under the saddle. Your riggings are what tie the saddle onto the horse. They should be intact. There shouldn't be any cracks in any of the straps holding the saddle on the horse. And your stirrup leathers are something that are routinely replaced. You have to check them. If you can bend the leather and little cracks pop out, it's not safe.
Which I guess, while we're still on the subject a little bit, then it brings up the idea of, you're a custom saddle maker and you do higher end saddles, is that you kind of get what you pay for, right? And I'm not saying that to endorse, what you do or what I'm doing, but when you buy a cheaper saddle, you get lesser material and lesser craftsmanship, and when the parts wear out, they're not easily replaceable, right? You're basically gonna throw away that saddle and go buy you something else, whereas if you buy a little higher end saddle, you can replace parts and it's more economical, right? So that $5,000 saddle may last you your entire life, right? Where that $1,000 saddle may, every 5 years, depending on how much you ride, you need a new saddle. So over the life of it, you're gonna have the same amount of saddle money as if you bought the one in front, right? Or, buy the cheaper saddle and upgrade, right? Sell it to one of your friends who are getting into it and take that money and, just step up the program.
But I think it's important to note that not everybody needs that high-end saddle. There's room for everybody on there, and a lot of people don't need to invest the money when they start out in a custom handmade saddle. The production saddles, the quality of them has really improved in the last 10 or 15 years.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is, if you're a terrible rider and your horsemanship sucks, a $5,000 is just gonna make you still a sucky horseman and an expensive saddle. It just make you better looking.
Yeah, that's true, and there's something to be said for that too.
So, There you go. You want to reach into the hat? I think that's it for round 1.
Okay.
Ding ding. Let's go to round 2. Survey says, is that Phil Dawson?
I don't know.
No.
No? Remember Family Feud?
Yep,
Was that
yep.
Phil Dawson?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm old. I mean, we know.
I know.
We know. Okay. This one says, I was just wanting to know if you think success is more physical or mental. Joe from Ohio. So, I don't know if that means success for you or your horse, or your mentality or your horse's mentality, but let's break this one down. What do you think, Flynn?
I think a lot of it is mental, and the way you ride, the way you train your horse or set your horse up for whatever it is, and I don't know, a bad rider can ruin a real good horse, and vice versa too. But I just don't know anymore.
Well, that's a pretty deep question.
Well, we like to hit it deep here on Cuss and Discuss, you know. I mean, it's not for babies.
Well, I'd say you can learn the physical part of it and the horse too. You can teach a horse, or you can learn the physical part of any event by repetition. You get all that down, then the mental part comes into play more, because if you're competing, the mental part is what separates you from other people that are at the same level. And with YouTube and training and schools now, in any event, you can, if you've got the money, you can get the horse, and you can get the knowledge, but then it's using that knowledge. And I think it's the same way with a horse. We've all had horses that we could teach to do something really well, but when the chips were down, they just didn't care. They'd say bye. And
Right.
so it's a mental thing. We call it heart, but you know, it's a mental thing with the horse too.
I mean, I think, you know, I guess there's a couple ways that I look at it, because if you had, because I used to race bicycles, right? So if you have everybody and you're all trained up at the same level, right? The guy that wins is the guy that can suffer and hurt the most, right? So it's all in your head, with all things being similar, right? And one of the things we talked about on one of the episodes previously was about the world's greatest horseman. Okay, so now you go there, and now they put the extra money in it, you know, and it's 100,000 or 150, whatever it is now, right, to win it. That is one expensive loop, right? So, I mean, I don't really care who you are. When you go down and you have one loop to throw for $100,000, you know what I mean? Like, that's got to mess with you. I mean, it's pretty hard to be cocky or arrogant or confident enough in yourself, knowing that, like, I'm gonna back in the box and I'm gonna make it happen, right? Because you can rope every day and do those runs and practice, but when, you know, that money's on the line, you know what I mean? That's a pretty big deal. And, you know, like you say, same thing with the horses, right? Is that you can take a horse that doesn't have the abilities, but the rider believes he can, and then all those things will happen, and some people call it luck, right? But you can have the guy that had the horse that won the fraternity, and then, you know, marked a 22 or 25, right? And turn around, and then somebody else show him, and he can't mark a 10, right? Because the guy, you know, the guy just doesn't have that confidence. And, you know, I think in any sport where you're, you know, professional, whether it's, you know, building saddles or training horses or whatever it may be, you have to have a certain level of cocky arrogance, right, to make that deal work, because nobody or very few people in this business, right, is going to toot your horn, right, because everybody in essence wants what you want. Because if you're looking at, there's only a small group of people, and we all want the better horses, and we all want the better customers, and we all want this. Everybody's got the thing. So, you know, if somebody has a problem, there's somebody else in the background saying, well, I can fix that problem, right? And it just goes that way. And, you know, so you can't let those things get into your head, right? I think you believe in your program, you believe in the saddles that you build, the horses that you're selling, and all those things will take care of themselves. Don't you agree?
Right. Yeah, I do.
I mean, it's you know, the horse, I mean, I guess it's life, not just business, right? But the whole horse world game is, it's tough. I mean, I can't.
While you're talking about this, I've got a little quick story here. They used to have what they call the West Texas team roping, at Snyder, Texas. It was a calf roping, but each county in West Texas could send a 4-man team, and they just had a big jackpot roping. And Bill Riddle, Terry Riddle, Jess Blackwell, and myself, we were a Wichita County team one time. And I was the last roper of the last day. And all I had to do was get it around his neck and get a time, and we won the team roping. That's the most pressure that was ever put on me, was just to have to rope that darn calf. But I got him roped, and
That's good.
I still don't know how, but I did.
Right.
And I took an extra jump to make sure everything was right.
Right.
But that gets into the case too, you know.
I mean, I have a similar story, right? My sister, she used to play a bunch of pool, and not that she was a hustler, but she played with a bunch of the pool guys, right? So I went home one time back at Christmas, and so, you know, they kind of, the best guy takes the worst guy, and of course I'm the worst guy, right? Because I train horses and don't play pool. And so anyway, so we make it all the way through this tournament, and I mean, it paid like, I don't know, $500 or $1,000 or whatever, but you know, I was on a guy that was very a personality about everything, right? So he was pretty good all the time about leaving me shots so I could hit it. So apparently he got way too confident in my skills and abilities, and we make it to the championship round, and he leaves the ball right by the pocket. Well, it's a long way down that table, right, to hit this ball in. All I gotta do is just tap it in and we win the tournament, right? Hit it down there, kiss the ball, and the rail doesn't go in, right? So needless to say, the guy that was my partner was not very pleased with the outcome of this, since we ended up losing it. And all I could look at him and say was, that's why I train horses and don't play pool, right? And he didn't find the humor in it that I did, but, right, I mean, so to me, the pressure was on him, right? Because he wanted us to win because that was his deal, and, you know what I mean? So mentally, I wanted to win mentally. I just didn't have the skill and the ability to do it. Right? I mean, so, I mean, mentally, I'm a winner.
Yeah.
But shooting a ball down 8 foot of green on a table, nah, I'm not. You know what I mean? I proved that. So needless to say, they didn't invite me ever to play pool again. And we lost, and the guy wasn't happy, and I'm still training horses, though.
Well, that's good.
Yes.
With all you got, a position's the worst place to be in. I think if it's all you got to do,
That's right.
that's the hardest thing to do.
That's right.
Yeah. It's a lot easier when, you know, it's something that you're comfortable with, and you have the skill, and you've practiced, and you've done it a million times. I mean, then it's secondhand. And we were talking earlier about it, was the guy at the NFR, the roper, and you probably know it better than I do, right? That came out and, you know, whacked his horse with the rope and then gave it the old Houlihan backhand, you know what I mean? And still, I mean, you can't, I mean, he's probably done it a jillion times, right? At home screwing around. And not ever thinking that he's never ever going to use that in competition, you know what I mean? And then there it goes, but I promise you he didn't think about it.
He did.
Right?
It's just muscle memory.
He just did it, right? And you got to do that stuff so much, and then that gives you the competitive edge because you know how to handle a bad outcome, right? Because I've always said when we're training horses and showing is nothing but crisis management, right? Everybody's in a crap storm. It's how well you handle that crap storm that decides whether you win or not. You know, because when you interview the guy that won the fraternity, that's the best run he ever had in his life. But you know deep down, he's like, I was a little bit long here, or I could have been a little faster on the barrier. Now, he won and he's happy, but you know there's something that can always be better.
That's true.
So just figure out how to handle the crap storm, and then that's how you get to be successful. Okay.
And we all have our own demons. It's just, you got to identify your personal demon and overcome that.
Right, yeah. I mean, hey, it's easy for me to ride my own horses because I put all my bad habits on them, right? Like I said, I mean, we know how to do it. But you get on my horse and your bad habits aren't the same as mine, you know, and now you have problems spinning mine, you know, because you want to pull him or you want to kick him because that's how you have to turn yours around. So, I mean, it doesn't make it that you're a bad rider or I'm a bad rider or, you know, Flynn, right? It's just how those pieces go together on making it work. But that's what makes it interesting, because they always say you can't judge a man until you've ridden his horse. right? Because, you know, why is he pulling on that one all the time? Why is he pulling?
Yeah.
Well, probably because he's trying to run off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a reason probably why he's doing that. And, you know, I mean, it's just how life goes, right? So you figure it out. So we good on that one?
I think we solved it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was pretty good. So we've come to the conclusion that it's all 100% mental, right?
As my doctor says, it's all in your head.
Yeah, right. 100% mental, 50% physical. Was that the rest of the question?
I think-
Physical. Plus, you got to be in shape. Well, I'm lying. You don't have to be in shape. So let me say. So I'll
We're
tell
in
you.
pretty good shape for the shape we're in.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story. Because one time my wife said, she's like, you know the reason you haven't won anything big? And I'm like, I have no idea. Why is that? She's like, because you're not fat enough. She's like, because all the good guys that are winning are fat.
Yeah.
So apparently I haven't arrived yet.
Well, tough on them then.
I know. You just wait. One day when you see me fat, you know, shit's getting real. Steve has arrived. So
I must be awful good then.
that's what I said earlier. You're my hero, Flynn.
Yeah.
Yep. Not everybody can have a Flynn. Well, you want to go back to the hat?
Sure. I like this. Kind of like playing the lotto with
Right,
the wrist.
right. Yep. Oh, I get to choose. Survey says, how old is too old? Tina from West Virginia.
Well, Tina, what do you have in mind?
Yeah, true story. You know, I mean, I don't think that you can ever really be too old.
So only
Can
in
you?
your mind. Let's get back to
That's
the mental
right.
and physical.
Right?
I know people that are too old when they're 50.
Right?
If I ever get to be 50, I'm not going to do that.
Right? What about you, Flynn?
Well,
Do you think right now if somebody said, Flynn, I got a horse for you to ride, are you getting on and going riding?
no, I'm not.
Because you don't want to or because you can't?
I just don't want to. And
Good answer.
Gary Belenfant, he's in his 70s for sure. And he won the Futurity 2 years ago, if you recall.
For the second time.
For the second time, yes. Against a lot of those young bucks at 20 or 30 or 40 or whatever. But it's just, he's got that skill about him.
Right?
And Buster Welch, I understand, is still riding some horses, even though I think he's about 92 or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jack Brainerd, right? We were talking about Jack
Yeah.
earlier. He's
Oh, yeah.
going to be 100, and I just
Yeah.
saw where he's doing a clinic with Chris Cox. Whether he's riding or not, still, I don't know. He probably is, you know? Yeah, but, yeah,
He was a dandy. I really like Jack Brainerd.
yeah,
Yep.
you know, he's doing it right, whatever it is that he's doing.
Yeah.
But I don't know that, if you think about it, when you get older, you get smarter. Right? Don't you think that's what it is? Because a lot of the stuff that you do in the beginning, let's say, is that, you know, you're trying to impress people and you're trying to make all this stuff and you're trying to prove yourself and you do all these things. And then when you get older and you don't necessarily care as much, then everything kind of gets easier because you know how to make those things happen.
Yeah.
Right? And you know how to make the pieces come together, but you're not so worried about impressing anybody anymore.
Well, I agree with you to a point, but I've seen a lot of guys that were just, I'd call them naturals on things that were hard for me to do in rodeo and roping.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times there was a young guy that didn't have to worry about paying the bills. He didn't have a job. All he thought about was roping. And he really didn't care about anything except what he was going to do that night after the rodeo. And some of them were just didn't have any pressure, you know, other than the pressure they put on themselves, which they didn't. They were just, you know, not worried about anything. So I think to some degree, sometimes a younger person has a little less pressure on them if they have that kind of mindset.
Right.
But
But don't you think being hungry and living on a diet of ramen noodles and Kool-Aid, I mean, makes you want to be better?
well, it does. You know, it depends. Everybody reacts to that differently.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say. But I'd say as far as the age thing, if you slow down, you lose it. I think it's people have enough passion that they overcome the day-to-day. That, you know, I still go rope, but I take some ibuprofen before I do.
Right.
And that's knowing your limitations, but continuing anyway. So I think as long as you have the passion to do something, you're not too old.
Well, like you said, age is just a number.
Yeah.
And if you can go do it and you can be competitive, we had Jim Willoughby on, a while ago. I think I think he said 82. I don't want to make him too young or too old, but I think he said 82.
I think
he still rides a few, and still does it, right? Yeah. But I mean, and then it becomes the love of the sport. Yeah. I mean, when you're still doing it when you're that age, I'm sure maybe he would he's already won the fraternity. And he's probably done everything that he'd hoped to do, if not more, and the the horse world. But he's just wanting to go and just keep doing it, right? Because he enjoys it. And I think that's one of the things when we talk about the age being the number and the abilities that we have or the horse has, and hard work will always beat natural talent if natural talent doesn't work hard.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I mean, it seems like I heard that somewhere before, but if I didn't, that was a good thing we have that one on camera. Exactly. I'm glad we got that on camera because that one was a good one.
You need to run that back and put it in your book.
For sure. Yes.
See, one reason I said no, I wouldn't want to do it is I had a stroke about 7 years ago, and I can't ride a bike. I'd be afraid I'd lose my balance on a horse or something, so I just quit.
When's the last time that you've ridden a horse? Because I've known you for a long time, right?
Yeah.
30 years. Yeah. And I've never seen you ride a horse.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, it was probably 10 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Something like that.
Yeah, right? And you're still riding every day and competing, right?
Yeah, not as much as I did. I've got a lot of other things going on, but yeah, I got to play cowboy somehow.
Right. Now, not that I'm trying to get your age, but you are how old?
63.
63. Mm-hmm. And still competitive in the roping.
Yeah. I don't crave the going down the road like I did. I used to be the best part of it for me. I could drive all night to get to something and rope when I got there. I just don't crave that as much. I still like doing the roping to get better at it. And I used to rope more calves. Now I'm just team roping. Mm-hmm. And it's really fun for me to work on it to try to get better. Mainly because I got a long ways to go. So
right. Well, I think you never really arrive.
No.
Right. Because I mean, especially where we're at, there's so many great horsemen and women down here. Is that you're basically what you did yesterday. Because you can win the fraternity, and be the hot ticket. And next year, who are you? Yeah. Right. Nobody knows because there's somebody else that's stepped in to take your place, right? There's a few that have the longevity, Trevor Brazil or some of those other guys that just crank it out year after year after year.
Gary Bellenfant that we were talking about,
yeah, and it just makes you wonder how. I mean, I think I read somewhere in an article, Bill Horn, the reiner, didn't even start riding horses till he's 30.
Yeah, it was late.
And he went on and won the fraternity how many times, and all the stuff that went with it. So it's never, you're never too old to start. You just have to have the want to.
Yeah. And
I think that's where a lot of people, when another good saying, right? When the going gets tough, the tough gets going, right? Yeah. And it's hard on everybody, right? When you're roping and you're missing and things aren't going well, it alludes back to the mental game and how all those pieces come together, but you just have to soldier through, and you realize that tomorrow is another day. And I think when we're younger, and I remember that from when I started out, is that you just dwell on that stuff so much, every day. You go home and you wonder why this horse isn't working and how all these things are falling apart, and you can't sleep at night, and you're riding horses in your sleep trying to figure out what it is. And then when you get older and you just remember that maybe that's just a bad day, and tomorrow everything's back to normal, right? And you got stressed out over nothing.
Well, I think that having something to work on to get better at keeps you young. It's not just that are you too old to do it, but if you do it, it's going to keep you young, because, and especially around this area, we're fortunate because there are so many good people. So whether you're riding reiners or ropers or cutters, you can learn from a lot of them. And with the way video is these days, you can see anybody's run on doing anything. Right. And all that advice is out there. Everybody likes to give advice on YouTube. So, it keeps you young when you've got something to work on to get better. Right. Whereas if you're just, and it can work the other way. If you're just trying to stay where you're at and you're going down, that can be tough on you. But if you're trying to get better, at anything you do, not just horses. If you have a drive, there are a lot of painters that didn't start till they were older. You know, it's something that you want to, if you're pushing yourself to get better, it's going to keep you young because you're still trying to go on your journey.
No. Going to the gym? Do you go to the gym? You work out? Do anything? No?
No, I did for a while. I had to get a new hip put in, and I worked out really hard to get back to. I actually got better than I was, but with and I got strong enough to where I could go back and ride and do all that stuff. But with me, it's a time thing. I go all day long anyway, so I don't feel like I have the need to. I'd probably be in a little better shape if I did, but it's a time. It's mainly just not being able to fit anything else in. And if I have the time, I want to go rope.
Right. What about you, Flynn? You go to the gym?
No, I don't.
No?
I never have been to it. Well, I went to one for rehab after I had my stroke, but I just always was too busy to get to go work out we had the ranch to run, and I had probably 20 head of trading horses and all of that, and it just took up too much of my time.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that when you get older, then it's important about like just taking care of yourself?
Yeah.
Well, when you're young and you burn candle from both ends, right? And then you get older and you can't do that. Like I said, not craving the running up and down the roads. I mean, you think that's...
Yeah, I think you got to take care of yourself. And if I didn't do what I do, I'd want to be in the gym. I'd probably, I go all day from pushing the wheelbarrow to, everything, shoveling hay off hay bales and just doing physical stuff that if I worked in an office, I would never do that. I'd need to do something, but I try to watch what I eat too and be smart about stuff. And I'm not puritanical on what I eat or do, but everything's in moderation.
Yeah.
Not too much whiskey every night.
Well, I watch what I eat too.
Yeah.
As I'm sticking it in, right? Going to horse shows, you know what it is.
Yeah.
Hamburger. I mean, I've eaten so many hamburgers in my life. Like, it's very, very difficult for me to try to choke a hamburger down. When you go judge, what do they feed you? Hamburgers.
Yeah.
When you go to horse show, the concession stand most of the time.
Yeah.
Hamburgers. I've eaten enough hamburgers that it's pretty hard to try and just choke one down because of. So
I don't have that problem.
Is that right?
Their hamburger is one of my favorite foods.
Oh yeah. I think that this is what happens when you get old, right? You forget where you're going. Anyway, let's dip into the hat. I did have a valid point. I'll come back and get it here later.
Well, he's right. Hamburger is one of the most efficient meat delivery systems there is.
Ready? You ready?
Oh yes.
Oh, another great one.
Uh-oh.
Talent versus training. So, I'm not sure if this means people, horses, both. We'll cover both of those, but it's Debbie from Dallas.
Debbie? The Debbie?
The Debbie from Dallas, apparently.
Debbie, I've seen all of your work.
Well,
impressive.
I was lucky enough to be closely associated with what I think is probably one of the best cutting horse trainers of my generation, and that's Bill Freeman. And he trained Smart Little Lena, and talent it just didn't make any difference. They were both as good as they could be and got to be as good as they could be. Did as good as they could do. And I don't know whether the talent or the training, he had the best talent, Smart Little Lena did, and his trainer was Bill Freeman, who I always thought was the best trainer ever.
Right.
And so it's hard to divide that out there.
Well, but from the horse aspect of it, right? And the only horse, Bill trained other horses other than Smart Little Lena.
Sure.
It's pretty hard to, overcome that shadow, right?
Yeah.
Everything else is going to kind of fail in comparison to
yeah.
what that horse is. But yeah, I think you have to have a certain amount of talent to just be able to stay on and ride and do those things.
Oh, yeah.
I think maybe Jack Brainerd had said it right. Is that there's been more great horses that have made great horsemen than horsemen that have made great horses.
Well, that's probably right too.
Yeah. So it's a tough deal. If you got the ones that want to crave it and do it, they'll make you look smart.
Yeah.
In spite of yourself, right? We were talking earlier today about Petrie, the Andalusian that we had. He made me look like I knew what I was doing, and that was over the course of 20 years. And I promise you, what I know now compared to what I knew 20 years ago, is night and day difference. But he still won in spite of me, right? Because I just kept him pointed in the right direction and didn't get in his way. But he took care of the rest of it, and it made things way easier. And I think with breeding, the genetics of people and the training has gotten better, especially now. Think about it a long time ago. Like, I know when I worked for Keith, and you guys probably know because you guys are old enough, is that like people just didn't give you the answers, right? When somebody was doing something and they were winning, they kind of kept that to themselves.
Yeah.
And now with the advent of YouTube and the internet and smartphones, and information is readily at hand. If you have a problem, clinics, right? You can ask anything. And I think I don't know. I don't want to say which one was first. We had John Lyons and Buck Brenneman and that whole group of guys all at the same time. They did a bunch with getting it out there and teaching people the stuff. But now if you got a problem, what does everybody do? Google it or YouTube it. And I guarantee you, whether it's a right answer or not, there's going to be 10,000 answers of how to fix your problem. And you could just start at the top of the list and work your way through it, and eventually one of those things are going to work.
Yeah.
So
You're right. And the internet's improved the learning curve for everybody. I see it in leather work. The kids that are coming out that are so talented in carving and tooling, it's because they study those YouTube videos, and it's worldwide. All over the world people are doing it. It's the same with any other thing that you do. But roping, when I was trying to learn to rope, we had 8mm movies, and you might take a movie of somebody and then it get developed a month later, and then you might get to watch it when everybody could set up the projector. And that's how my generation, that was the best we had to study anything. It was really hard. But when portable video cameras came along, that just no matter what you did with horses, you could break it down. You could see the horse, you could see the rider, break it down frame by frame. So you're right, it has made a large effect on the talent and the way
it has.
But talent versus, what was the question again? I've been talking talent versus training. I think I'd have to say the horse has to have a heart and a big heart, because he can have a lot of training. If he doesn't have that heart, he's not going to rise to the occasion, or he's not going to stay honest. And a person with talent can only bring so much out of them. And so I'd say part of the horse's talent, if you want to look at it like that, is having that heart. It's just like we talked before about the mental aspects of things. So it goes back to that question.
Yeah, I believe that when you get the talent, you've got a talented trainer, right, that has a great training program, and the horse has the talent and accepts the training, right? Because if you got one that has all the talent in the world and he's just a pisshead, for lack of a better term, right, you're never going to get anywhere with him. So when you have those two things, talent and training on both sides, and you put them together, then that's when you get the magic. The Bill Freeman and the smart little Lena, and you go look just through whatever event it is, right, on what those things are. Trevor Brazil, and what's that horse he had? Texaco or something. Right? So like everybody's got that thing, but when those two things come together, then it becomes magic, because it works. And you can have one on both sides and still get along, but you can't have two on one side and none on the other, right? Because you can't take and give somebody a horse that just is a sale barn crapper right, that doesn't have the confirmation or any talent for anything, and put a world champion on it and expect him to go do something.
That's right.
Right, and the same deal is, you can give them the fraternity champion from last year, and if they can't ride and stay on, and they hang in his mouth, they're not going to win anything either. So I think it's the
Combination of the two.
Right, and that's the fine line on that talent that goes with it, right? Because there's millions and millions of dollars that have been won and lost on a fraction of a second or half of a point. And that half a point can come from literally all these questions that we've had tonight. The mental capacity or this or that. And you won a little bobble on shutting your horse off in time. And, now it becomes a half point overspin.
Yeah.
Or, a hot quit.
Yeah.
Because, dang, they're cows. And just because you pick your hand up and go to quit because you think the cow's going to stop, then you get smoked, then...
Well, anytime you add a cow into the equation, you've complicated it a bunch. It's no longer the same equation because you've got a horse that has to cooperate, but now you got a cow that doesn't want to cooperate and he's not trained.
Yeah.
So whatever your event is, that's when the pressure gets on there because he's going to throw something at you that you aren't expecting and you have to react to it.
Right. And then it goes back to one of the things we talk about at the clinic, especially with cows. And generally, it's not that your horse has a cow problem, right? It's generally that your horse isn't broke enough or trained enough.
Yeah.
Because if he just does what the cow does, most of those horses are pretty dang smart, right? They're going to read the cow before you do, right? Yeah. So, you just have to be close. But sometimes you're not good enough to even be close.
And sometimes just stay out of his way.
Right.
Don't do the wrong thing.
Yep. We've talked about that on other episodes. Is that sometimes you learn more by knowing what not to do than what to do, and generally, especially in the cutting, right? If you just stop and turn, that's probably 90% of it.
Oh yeah.
But how many people can't stop?
Yeah.
And then turn.
Well, of course.
They turn up into them where they don't stop, right?
Yeah.
And then you chase a cow or you run one off or whatever. But you think that simple equation. Stop and then turn.
Yeah.
And when you throw a cow into it, it all goes down the drain, right? Because you can work a flag and you can practice it, but as soon as that cow gets in there, common sense goes down the drain.
Yeah.
That's right.
Is it that way in the roping?
Because they've got a mind of their own. And roping's the same way.
Yeah. Well, I'm just talking about even on the rider's deal, because as soon as that cow takes off and it doesn't do exactly what you want, you go into panic mode, right? The crap storm. And you go to overriding or overspurring or doing all these things and just get yourself out of position and you beat yourself, which goes back to the mental game. If you would have just backed off a little bit, maybe you go out there and make a nice easy run and you get a 5-second run rather than a 4.5 second run.
Yeah.
5 seconds would have got you a check.
Yeah.
Instead, you got nothing.
Look at depressing.
For sure. I like to go show and win and not get any money.
Yeah.
That always makes it good.
Well, then you know that you're doing it for the love of the sport.
Exactly. Yep. Well, we got any more in the hat?
No, nothing else.
Well, okay.
Are these guys sponsors? Because I'll mention them.
Well, they can be if they want. American Hat Company, if you want to be in on the deal when we reach into your hat, it's a perfect time right now. American Hat Company can sponsor Cuss N Discuss. Seems fair enough.
Sounds good to me.
Doesn't it?
Yep.
American Hat Company. So, we hope that on this episode tonight, you like the kind of the way we did it with the drawing the topics from the hat rather than having one big long one with a bunch of different ones. And it makes it a little more entertaining. I think it's always good for me to get the different viewpoints on the way people look and view things. You guys are about the same. You're older, so it's trickled down.
Yeah.
So I'm the young one.
Yeah.
But it's just the way people view things. Is that in the end, we're all going for the same thing, right? The enjoyment and the love of horses, and spending that time with them and having fun with what we're doing. But yet all these other things get in our way, right? Life and money and stress and how you do these things, and maybe your horse is not riding good today, and then just all of a sudden is that now it takes on a whole different meaning than why you got into it in the beginning. Because you got into it to relax and enjoy it. And then as soon as, it's like when I grew up racing bicycles, right? There's never ever a bike ride that involves two guys that's going to go easy.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, because when there's two guys, somebody's going to try to be in front.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, so that's what this is, I believe, right? You go to a roping and my horse stops a little harder than yours and mine cows a little better than yours, and now it becomes that stressful environment because everybody's trying to prove themselves rather than just going and having fun.
Right.
And, just enjoy it. If you have a synthetic saddle and you like to ride in it and you're comfortable and your horse came from the sale barn and you enjoy it every day, it doesn't make two nickels what anybody else said, right? Because you're going and enjoying it.
The deal is, all of us, and most people I talk to that are in one of our associated fields, I mean, we all grew up being as kids that wanted to be cowboys. That was our dream. We didn't think we'd end up where we did, but we watched the films and read the books, and that's what we wanted to do. And so we're really living the dream, and you got to kind of look at that once in a while and say, this is a pretty good deal.
Right. I mean, it could always be worse. That's what I always say, right? When I have a bad day,
Yeah, you can say that too.
I mean, I could be digging ditches for $10 an hour in the 110 degree sun, right?
Yeah.
Could always be worse. And I got it pretty easy when I get to go do a clinic or get to go ride horses and get to do what I like every day, and be at home and live it. And a funny story that goes with that before we kind of pull the plug on it today is that my youngest, he asked me one day, he's like, Dad, why is it that you don't have a job like the other dads? And I'm like, God, what are you talking about? And he's like, look, he said, all the other dads get up and go to work. And I'm like, what do you think I do every day? He's like, look, you just get up and go to the barn and ride horses and have fun. Right? So,
That's right.
I mean, that's a great thing to know that, even though sometimes it does feel like a job, right? I mean, that's a good position to be in when you get to do what you love and your kids get to see you doing what you love, and everybody just thinks of it that is not a job, right? And we get the luxury of hanging out with great people and meeting friends and building relationships and getting to cuss and discuss, talking about what we like about it and what we don't. And I think what boils down to it in the end for us is that we all may be different, but we're all trying to get to the same point in the end. And nowadays, everybody's willing to help anybody out. I mean, I've called you a lot with a lot of the stuff that we're doing, and you're always more than willing to help out and give me advice and answer questions, and the same with you. And I mean, I'm the most useless one here.
Well, I
mean,
wouldn't say that.
you guys don't really call me for advice, but if you want, you can give me a call. I'll make sure I give you my number.
I'll start doing it. I've got a lot of problems I'm trying to work through.
Okay. Yeah. I've been called on a lot to answer tough questions. So, it may not look like it, but I can do it. So, you have anything to say before we sign off?
Oh, I don't really. No.
No? What about you?
Just I really enjoyed it. I hope I can come back sometime and have another cup of coffee with you.
Of course. That's what we like to do.
Sure.
So, as always, be sure that you send in, if you've got new topics that you want answered, things for us to cuss and discuss again, right? You don't have to necessarily like what we have to say. We're just giving you our opinions, and everybody's got an opinion. So, take it for what it's worth. And if there's anything that you want answered, put it in the description. We'll try and figure it out. We'll answer it. If not, we'll get somebody smarter than us to answer it. And, we'll go on with it. So, as always, I'm Steve Kutie. Ride hard, be safe, and have fun. Thanks to Flynn Stewart, Nick Pernokas. We'll see you next week.